Hi, my name is Ellie Brocklehurst, and with me today is my beautiful friend and co-host Beck Nadalo, and together we are full-timers. As two working mums with small children and hubbies in tow, we've come to the realisation that the best way to define us, and a lot of people out there, is that we're full-time. Full-time mums, full-time wives, full-time employees, friends and daughters. And with all that full-time comes with it a lot of weight, obstacles and constraints, but also a lot of great opportunities. We've been searching for somewhere to validate our feelings about what it takes to be a woman in today's world. So rather than continue that search, we thought, let's start it. Welcome to the Full-Timers Club.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Full-Timers Club. I'm Beck.
I'm Ellie.
And we launched officially on Spotify 5 days ago maybe? Yeah.
Friday.
Last Friday. And the response is just like beyond what we thought it would be.
Yeah.
It's been actually quite overwhelming.
Completely. That's exactly how I've explained it. It's been emotionally overwhelming.
Yeah. I think for me, the reason why for me it's been so overwhelming and emotional is because the stories that we're getting from women and men who particularly our redundancy episode is resonating with, because they're either going through the same thing or they've just gone through it.
Or they're fearful of going through it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much anxiety out there. And this topic seemed to have struck a chord with people in a way that I guess they feel like there hasn't really been anything out there at the moment that's reflecting the way that they're feeling.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we wanted to pick up on this topic of redundancy and do almost like a part 2 episode, because one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about is how much redundancy has affected your sense of identity and your self-worth, sense of self. And my God, it has been completely heartbreaking. Women and men who are so capable, accomplished, amazing people who are really senior positions, who almost have just been crushed by this event.
Yeah. I think the kind of consistent almost line that we've received whenever we get comms from people is, I just don't know who I am anymore. Or the other one was always like, I just have never felt so low. And it was just really shocking because we've gone through it and we know those feelings.
Yeah.
But it just feels very jarring when it's kind of consistently said to you over and over, because then you're like, wow, this is actually like a very real feeling.
Totally. The sheer volume of people who have echoed exactly the same sentiments, like being ghosted by recruiters or just people kind of promising jobs or promising to help but then just not being there, not feeling seen. They feel like it's completely shattered their kind of convictions, their confidence and their self-worth, and they're either having to accept jobs that are like way below what they know they're worth, or they're still looking 12 months in. You know, one of our very good friends, she got made redundant, and she said she vividly remembers me calling her one day and she was literally on her bed sobbing because she was like 12 months into still looking for work. And this is someone who used to be a global COO. Like it's happening to everyone and anyone, men, women, junior, senior. So I think this is why this was a topic we wanted to carry on and keep talking about, and particularly this idea of self-worth and sense of identity, because I think we both struggled with it as well, and clearly it's resonating with people. So first off, Ellie, how do you feel, just to recap, like how do you feel like it kind of fucked with your self-worth or self-identity?
So I think when I said this in the last episode around how I was trying to carve out a role for myself and the fact that I was feeling really confident in what that was, I think it just set me back so much because, as I said, I hadn't got there.
Yeah.
And so then I remember literally coming out of that conversation, and I think one of the first things I thought was, I don't now know where to look. Like, I don't know what jobs to look for, because I was kind of at that point where I'd pivoted away from what I was doing a little bit. So I wasn't just doing PR and communications. I was moving into a more growth, more strategic marketing role. And then I was like, but that's been such a small portion of the role I just done. So then I kind of thought, well, I don't really know if I can go for those kind of roles because I don't really have the proof points. I didn't particularly want to go back into a role where I was before. And then I just think I just went through this kind of whirlwind like just tailspin of I don't even know where to start. I think that's the thing for me that really freaked me out was I had this question yesterday actually when I spoke to someone who reached out to us. She was like, is this the point in my life where I pivot? And I was like, oh, that's exactly what I did.
I had exactly the same. Yeah. Someone from advertising thinking they might go into psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Not themselves, but actually like retrain, go back to school.
I mean, I'm laughing because I'm like, yeah, same. I think, I looked at tech sales. I think I didn't even consider kind of brand roles, but I was just like, oh, maybe I'll just become like a product manager at a tech company. Like just things that I had no skill set in, but I was wondering is this the time to change? So I just think the worst thing about redundancy is that because you do feel like it's a bit of an attack on your value, it puts all your values, all your expertise into question.
Interesting. Yeah, right. It feels like that is, I don't mean like surface level in the sense of it's not a deep thing, but more like, it's hard to put this. Like, I feel like with me, it was such a deep identity crisis. And the only way I can explain this is, like people say, don't link your identity to work. And it's like, well, when work is 99% of your life, it's unrealistic not to do that.
Yeah.
But then I kind of had to force myself to go, okay, what is it that work is representing in my life? And how is it contributing to my sense of self? For some people, it might be about status. Like I'll never forget when my dad retired, he goes, overnight, I've gone from being the most important person in the boardroom to just Ken.
Guy.
His name is Ken. He's just Ken, and that sense of status, which work represented, I think for him, is just taken away from you within 24 hours.
Yeah.
For other people, it might be influence. For other people, it might be power. And I think when you dig really deep into, well, what is it that work represents in your life and what has been taken away from you, it then becomes a little bit easier to try and find it in other areas. And I think for me, work is all about achievement. Like I get so much satisfaction from finishing a day and knowing like I achieved X, Y, Z. Like I have to achieve something.
Like a tick off? Like as in I've done this? Or like, you've had success in what you've done?
Big and small. Okay. So it could be on people, like a sense of like I feel like I've accomplished something. It might be contributing to someone. It could be working on a big pitch and winning it. It could be working on a campaign and launching it. Like I need to see the impact of my work and actions, and then I get a huge sense of achievement from that. Like I need to be achieving things.
Yeah.
Probably why I found maternity leave so hard, because you're just like, it's monotony. You don't achieve anything, or actually maybe you do because putting a baby to bed or whatever is your sense of achievement. But I think for me, work represents so much of that. And so when you take that away, I was like, well, if I'm not achieving anything, which is also like, I've always been a high achiever. So people, my parents have always been like, oh, Beck's doing this or whatever. So when you take that away, you're like, I'm not worth anything anymore.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this is maybe why it's resonating, because a lot of the people who are commenting or reaching out to us, if you look at all of them, they are high achievers, high performing people, men and women, who are in really senior roles and who have just like had the rug pulled out from underneath them.
Yeah. You're saying achievement, and I'm trying to think of my own, what did I put into question? And they're kind of similar, but I kind of go back to value. Like it's, I think because my role so much is like, a collaborator, I kind of bring things together, bring teams together. Mine's more like the value that I've brought to others.
Yeah.
Like I really love when you have those kind of conversations where my input, all of a sudden at the end of it, you're like, oh, that was valuable.
Yeah.
I had a contribution to that.
Yeah.
So I think mine's more around the contribution, is actually being part of something that is successful. And maybe that just goes back to kind of what I do in my career. It's not as kind of, I guess, as I said, tick box or easily definable as achievement. But that's when like, it's the same thing though. It's just the fact that you just begin to question, if I don't do that in my day, then what do I do? Maybe
there's a sense of validation that work gives you as well.
Yeah.
That like you are bringing value and
I think this goes back to what we talked about so early on, which is who I am as a person. Like if the thing I realized when I was made redundant is I love my children and I love being a mother, but I am not made to stay at home with them all day every day.
Yeah.
And I again,
I get it.
you know, smashed online for that. But I just it was one of the first realizations for me that I just thought, my God, I just don't. I know I'm not going to thrive if I don't have something that is my own to be part of. And that was why I was like, right, find a job, because that is where I know I will be better if I find one.
I mean, look, being on mat leave, I feel like I had a whole newfound appreciation for stay-at-home mums. It is so hard. Going to work was like an escape.
Yeah.
I used to look forward to Monday mornings because I'd be like, awesome, I get to go to work.
Yeah.
Because I found it really hard.
It is really hard. It is. And I actually met someone yesterday who is a dad and he just sold his business like a year ago and his wife is a high achiever. They're moving to Singapore for her role. And he was like, I've been a stay-at-home dad since last February. And he's like, I mean, it is so hard.
Yeah.
And he is like, I try to tell as many dads as I can just how much women have it hard, because it is, it's just this all day, every day.
Yeah.
And he's like, and sometimes I don't speak to an adult. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, we know this going through mat leave, but
totally,
you know, they don't have that real intense one-on-one often, dads. And so I just kind of was like, I just felt like giving him a bit of a high five, because that was really awesome.
It's so funny you said that. I had a very good friend reach out the other day who was saying that the podcast made her and her husband talk about this. So they had mat leave and pat leave. So I think he had 4 months, she had 4 months.
Oh, amazing.
So she took 4 months and then he took the 4 months. And he clearly got it just as the regression was hitting.
Of course.
He was like a broken man.
Yeah.
And he often, you would say, like, I have a whole new appreciation for what my wife went through the first time, because this was their second child. And I think it's great. But he then would say, like, I feel identityless. Like, I don't know who I am anymore. And so I think, you know, it's interesting. Maybe it's like a self-reflection exercise that you have to do, where you look at what are the things that drive you, and where do you get that, or what fulfills that deeper desire or motivation. So for me, if it's achievement, okay, staying at home with my child probably isn't going to give me that. Work does give me that. But then what are the other things I can build into my life that help enable that? So like this podcast for me is probably one of the best ways to enhance or contribute to that sense of achievement, because I feel like, okay, I can see the impact I'm having. Yeah. I can see things happening and things launching. Obviously work is a huge part of that, and I get so much joy from and sense of achievement from work. Yeah. But maybe when you're going through this, you need to dig a bit deeper and go, so what is it that I'm missing? And then how can I build that from other things in my life?
That's such an excellent point, because I think because we've both been made redundant, there's always a fear in us, right? Like you and I have talked about this before, about even in our current jobs where we feel incredibly stable, we've got an amazing supportive companies.
There's a hangover. There is every single person I know that's been made redundant has said that feeling has stayed with them. Yeah. And it's like a hangover effect. It will never go away. That
I don't
sense
think it
of
will.
Insecurity will never go away after it's happened.
I totally echo what you're saying around this podcast, because I think what's important is if you have other things in your life as well as work and your family, the fear doesn't feel as fearsome. Like it kind of, you know, I think I'd have a way more maybe pragmatic approach to being made redundant if it happened again. I think I'd be like, that's okay. I've got other things in my life that fill me up. Whereas I think back then it was just my children. I mean, yes, I was very early postpartum, but that's a really interesting point, is maybe that's the thing. It's knowing what work's going to give you, and then knowing what else something else might give you. Yeah, exactly. Or know what work's giving you, and then how do you, if that's taken away from you, what else is filling that? I mean, there's a great guy called Jared who has got a podcast called Badlands. So Badlands is add people who have been made redundant and they're now in the Badland. Yeah. And I sent him a note the other day and I was like, freaking kudos to you for doing this. Like, you're taking a really shit situation, and I know it would be incredibly stressful. And he was like, there's been two sides of the coin. There's been this, which is I'm loving doing this because I'm meeting all other people, interesting people who've been made redundant as well, and just, you know, building a bit of a community. And then the other side is obviously, you know, still having to look for a job. But
I kind of was like, God, respect to you for channeling your energy into a really positive thing.
Yeah.
And I haven't had this conversation with him, but I'm guessing that work gave him some sense of purpose. And now this is giving him purpose in lieu of having that full-time job.
Yeah.
So kudos to you, Jared. So that, I feel like that's kind of something that helped me. I wanted to ask you as well, because I think some of the people who have reached out have also asked for like quite practical tips around like, what else did you do that got you through?
Yeah.
So is there anything that you can think of? And if you can't, I've written a list of things, but of course I have. Is there anything that you felt like helped you through it, or things that you would look back on and go, you should have done this?
And that's in searching for a job or just in life?
Oh, sorry. Dealing with redundancy.
Dealing with redundancy. Okay. I said this yesterday in a conversation I had with someone who asked me a very similar question, which was, like, what did you do? And for me, it was networking, like putting myself out there, telling people what had happened to me, not for sympathy, but because I felt like if I explained the situation, maybe I'd be judged less in some way. Like she was asking me if I was really open about it, and I said not publicly but privately, incredibly open. I think I needed to be busy. Like I think I felt like I wasn't very good at sitting idle, because I was really terrified that if I did that I just would wallow.
Yeah.
And so I think I got onto my LinkedIn pretty quick and was just like hitting up headhunters. In my first week, I was on holiday in Australia in this tiny country town that had the world's worst Wi-Fi. Like to this day, it blows me away how Australia's Wi-Fi connections suck so much.
NBN hadn't reached them yet.
And so I'd had like one of those I went and bought out a dongle, and I remember spending my first week of being made redundant on my computer.
Yeah. Speaking
to people, interviewing people, finding out about the market. And I think one of the best things that came from that was I didn't, after I went through that whole like, will I go into tech sales, will I do all this stuff, was that I was like, you know what, I actually want to be somewhere where my skills are going to be appreciated. I'm okay to be away from my kids. I know I'll add value. And so I got very granular on the type of roles that I wanted. So I did a heap of research into what was out there. I saw what kind of skills were being listed, what experience was needed. And I tailored my entire experience, CV, conversation starters all around exactly what I wanted. So I think for me, it was a mix of networking and talking to people, but also being very clear in what I wanted. But I now look back at that, and as I'm saying it, think we've said this before, I'm quite fortunate that I found this role that I did, because if I didn't, I don't really know what would have been out there.
Yeah.
And I think I'm coming from a side where everything I'd written down on my CV and everything I'd written down as my wish list was no joke, like the job description for the role that I'm in. So it was a perfect alignment.
Yeah, definitely.
So whereas, I'm going to ask you the same question, because I think you had a lot longer out of redundancy.
Yeah.
I was, by the time I got into a new job, I was 4 months. Post redundancy, 5 months?
3.
You were 3?
Yeah. I literally started I started a contract role, like a freelance role.
I remember you doing freelance.
Yeah. Oh. Contract role. It was literally as the 3rd month and it ticked over. So my pay, my like redundancy severance pay had just finished.
Okay.
And then I did that contract role, and while I was in that, my current job came along, and again it was a bit of like, okay, this is the dream job that I wanted. And I think that contract role for me, and this is what I'd say to anyone, and I kind of said it into the last episode, is like, have a long-term plan and have milestones. Figure out how long you can give yourself. And I know this sounds really bad, but it's like, what are you willing to compromise on? At the, first month, you're like, I'm not willing to compromise at all. I'm going to look for the job. That's my dream job. Month 2, where funds might be getting lower or confidence or whatever, you might start compromising. Month 3, month 4, like know what are your milestones and what are the things you are willing to or not willing to compromise on, because you might get to the point where you're like, you know what? The anxiety and the lack of finances coming in is much greater than if I'm just in a job that maybe I don't love it, but it's a job. So I would say that is a very practical thing. When do you
Very good advice.
Yeah. When do you need to compromise on, and what will you compromise on? Some of the other things that I was really thinking about, that I was trying to reflect on, like what helped me and what didn't. I think one of the hardest things, particularly when you're a high-performing individual, is you are probably surrounding yourself with like-minded people and people in a similar kind of thing. Like you're all execs or you're in really senior roles in different companies, which is awesome when things are going well, and when things are going bad, it's almost the worst thing because you're the only person who isn't in that role anymore. And I remember it made me feel really shit. And I kind of took a break from some groups and friends where I was like, look, this is actually not helping me at the moment. And it's okay to do that. And if you need to tell them that, then I'm sure they would understand. But be kind to yourself and know which friends lift you up and which friends, not through intention, but which friends don't lift you up, because actually the circumstances or the situation just doesn't make you feel good about yourself. And within that, know who your like pep talk person is. Like you were very much this for me. Yeah. But you know, when you're having a bad day and you're like, I just need someone to give me a pep talk and tell me I'm good and tell me I'm okay and whatever else it might be. And so it's almost like you strategically build your circles and your friendship groups, like do your networking and stuff. Have your pep talk person. If you need to take a break from some friends because it's not making you feel good about yourself, that's okay. Yeah. It's not a problem. Like people will understand. And just be really kind to yourself. Like this won't last forever, but in this period of time where you're feeling incredibly fragile and vulnerable, you might need to just be a little bit softer for you with yourself.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. I mean, I think we, as an industry, we know a lot of people that have gone through this or are going through this. And I remember having a lunch with two other people who were in the same spot, and I remember, I said, I'm very fortunate. I'm always counting myself fortunate for this, but I did find a job and I went to that lunch and I'd just been offered it. And I remember sitting there and just like actually feeling like really sad. Not about that I got it, but just that that they were still struggling to find something. And it was they were so amazing. And you know exactly the two people I'm talking about. And they were massive congratulations. But you know that deep down, I know exactly how they're feeling. Yep. And I was always really conscious of whenever I did then catch up with people, I was very just withheld a lot of the excitement that I felt about the new job, just out of like etiquette and respect for the fact that they probably were feeling probably worse. So I think, I think that's really good advice to be kind and surround yourself with the right people. But also for those who do then get the job and are around other people that have been made redundant, just have some respect for the fact that they're probably feeling completely 1,000 times worse in your presence.
Totally. I mean, I would liken it to when you're trying to get pregnant.
Oh, so true.
This is my experience with Roman. Like we tried for so long,
and then I got pregnant.
Yeah.
I remember being like,
but people that have like, they're like, oh my God, it was my first try and we got pregnant, and you're like biting your tongue and you're like, we've been trying for a year and it still isn't happening. It's kind of like that.
So the
same feeling where you're like, you're really happy for that person, but you're like, this also is making me feel like I'm going to go home and cry into my pillow.
No, you've completely hit a chord with that. That is so accurate. I've definitely been in that situation where I've been very anxious to tell somebody because I just knew that they were trying, and I actually remember with you, I remember feeling the same way, that I was really conscious that it had happened quite easily. But then you sent me the video of your pregnancy straight after, like a month or 2 months later. So,
did I?
Yeah, I remember you sent me the little stick.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, it was really cute.
It's funny how we forget these things.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that this is an episode that people can take a little bit more kind of comfort in, but also some really practical advice as well as to what they can do to help deal with the emotions that come with redundancy and the impact it can have on your self-worth and identity, and how work is a way to satisfy that deeper motivation or desire. It's not the only way. Yeah. You can find other ways to do that, and it could be running a marathon because, you know what, I'm going to train every day to get closer because I need to feel that sense of achievement. Or it could be, if it's not achievement that you're looking for and it's about influence or status, volunteering could give you that. You know, like there's so many other ways that you can fulfill those deeper desires or needs through other things beyond work while you're looking, so that you don't completely fall apart.
Yeah, great advice.
Awesome.
Okay, well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for being so open and authentic with us as well. I think we hope that you see that that's what we're like, but, you know, to get it back from you all has been pretty amazing. So continue to share if you've got any topics you want us to cover or us to go into part 2 of. We're very open to it. You know, follow our social channels. That's where we're going to put a lot of our little snippets and where we hope to engage with some of our listeners. So thank you so much for joining. This has been the Full Timers Club. I'm Ellie.
And I'm Beck.
And we'll see you next time.